Okay, should we start?
I think we should start.
All right. Well, thanks for coming to Locust Projects. I hope you enjoyed Alan and Amanda with their talk. My name is Hunter Braithwaite, and I am really happy to be in conversation with Virginia Poundstone, who has done the main galleries for this the next few weeks or months, or I'm not sure how long the show's up for. But this is BOG-MIA, and this is Virginia Poundstone. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for coming. It's so shocking to see everyone here. When they were setting up the chairs, I was like, you guys are putting out way too many chairs. So it's really nice to see everybody come out. Like Hunter said, the title of the show is BOG to MIA, and a lot of people have asked me how to pronounce the title of the show, so that's what it is. And the reason it's BOG to MIA is it's in the vernacular of the logistics of transporting goods via airplane.
Specifically from Bogota, Colombia to Miami, Florida. So BOG-MIA, whatever.
BOG-MIA. So as most of you from Miami probably know, Miami is a center for the flower trade. Most of the flowers in North America are grown in Colombia, and they are imported through Miami to then be distributed through the rest of the country. So my project is, when Shauna asked me to do the show, I decided to do a project that was about the trade route of flowers between Bogota and Miami. So I'm going to show you a couple outtake photographs from my trip to Bogota, to my research trip to the farms, so you can see a little bit of the behind the scenes. So this is the landscape of the savannah just outside Bogota. This is where all of the flower farms are, and what you can see here is a giant flower farm. So it's all a greenhouse structure. So you don't actually see flowers. You think like, oh, the land of flowers, and it's going to be full of colors, but it's just white. And this farm actually happens to be abandoned because it's in decline. The industry there is actually in decline, which we can talk about a little bit.
We're going to talk about that in a minute.
And so this is an interior of one of the greenhouses, and you can tell in the front room, I did a lot of work with greenhouses. I actually call the front room the greenhouse room, the middle room the map room, and this room the packing and display room. So this is what the inside of a greenhouse looks like there. And the name, all of the roses have really specific names. They've all been bred in Europe and sent there to be grown for this market. So some of the most popular are like Red Intuition is the title of this rose. This is the Hot Lady Rose, one of my personal favorites. And then the biggest seller is the Freedom Rose. And the Freedom Rose had a different name when it first came out from the breeder. And I don't remember what the name was, unfortunately.
French Rose.
Yeah, he named it French Rose in conversation. But it had this like really boring, normal name, and nobody was buying it. And it was just after September 11th, and they had a marketing meeting, and they renamed it the Freedom Rose, and it is now the #1 selling rose from Bogota. So that's an interesting little side note. So all over these places are these glorious garbage piles, like just absolutely beautiful garbage piles of leftover flower bits. So I was drawn to them. This is an aerial view of the packing plant. So this video here is a tripod shot of packers packing flowers, but this is the scope of the size of this packing plant. For one farm, this is just one farm's packing plant. And again, I was, really drawn to the garbage. So here's this worker standing on concrete all day amid rose petals. Seemed very romantic to me, which is horrible, but... and this is an aerial view of the flowers right before they go into the boxes. So all of the bases are the boxes that the cargo boxes that the flowers were shipped in. So this whole process that these men and women are doing in this video is to make all of the roses into these assortments. And this is the image that I used for some of the vinyls on the sculpture pieces as well. So sometimes there are flowers that are left over because nobody ordered them from North America, or they were just a little bit defective. They were deemed unworthy for export, and this is how they're transported locally to local markets. Flowers are not really part of Colombian culture. Is anyone here from Colombia? Yeah, can you guys, are flowers part of the culture, like on a daily level? No? Not, like it's not, you're from Colombia, are they like?
Yeah, it's kind of a strange question. I do remember, I left when I was 13, 14. I do remember flowers in the house, but I guess not every week.
Yeah, or like it's not as, you know, people don't give them to people as frequently. They're not, it's not like a big part, it's not like here where they're at the, like everyone has them, they go to the grocery store and they just get them and it's like a part of the daily thing. It's really just not, it's just not part of the indigenous Colombian culture there. Not like indigenous peoples there, that's a whole different culture, who has a different relationship to botany. But for these commercial flowers, it's just not really part of Colombia's culture to buy them often. It's really rare.
Well, Virginia, why are they made in Colombia, then are grown and harvested and shipped out?
Very good question. So Colombia the climate is perfect for them. It's a perfect climate to grow them. It's the elevation and the sun, it's close to the equator, and labor is cheaper there. The industry started there in the late 60s. The first boxes came to America in the early 70s, and that's part of how it's declined, is that it was so successful that the Colombian, other things made Colombia's economy rise, but now the Colombian peso is on a higher pace with the dollar, but they can't change the price of the flowers, and they have to pay more labor, and so now it's the profit margin has really, really shifted from the early 70s, and that's why some of the flower farms are going out of business. Did that answer your question?
It did.
Okay. So and this is the garbage pile outside of the packing plant. And this is the image that I used to make the giant canopy. How this product produces the most glorious garbage.
Really?
It's so beautiful.
Could you tell us about the material that's used to make the canopy, and also, I guess, these prints?
So I use commercial advertising printing techniques. So along with working with flowers as this commercial product, this commodity, I realized I needed to use the materials of commercial products for advertising. The original idea came from the greenhouses, because they're all covered in this mesh fabric to diffuse the light, because it's very, very bright inside of them. And I've been working with commercial printing for many years now. The ones on the vinyls on the glass are this exact same type of vinyl that's used to wrap cars and vans and stuff with ads. I'm sure you've all seen them running around town. So it's car ad material. Okay. Is that the last? Yeah, that's the last one of that.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, so now I'm going to move into showing you the inspiration for these sculptures. So like I said, the research went into turning Bogota into a place to grow flowers in the late 60s, and then it started really shipping in the early 70s. The reason that they were looking for a place to grow flowers cheaply was because of the rise in popularity of flower arranging as a hobby and as a something that we had in our lives on a constant basis. This is a book I found from 1968 that was written by Frances Louise Bode, who went to Mills College and had a degree in art and art history, and dedicated her life to the practice of flower arranging. And this book is incredible. She's so articulate about how she's referencing the contemporary art of the time, assemblage, pop art. She was really looking at high art in her pursuit of flower arrangement. It's my favorite book in the world. So in here are all kinds of really amazing flower arrangements. So this book really is the source of my formal inspiration for both the pieces in the hallway and the sculptures here in this room. And I'm just going to show you a few of them. And she was obviously looking towards the east, towards Ikebana styles and also Chinese traditional flower arrangement. But I think you can see the direct sort of inspiration going on between Frances Bode's work and my own.
Could we talk about the materials? I believe, having talked to you about them a little bit earlier, it seems like they're a really great entry point into some larger questions that you raise in this exhibition. I mean, just to begin with, the black granite stone.
Right. So all of these sculptures start with black granite stone blocks, and those blocks are the same size as the green flower foam that you guys have probably all experienced. So it's the exact scale as green flower foam, and I had them made out of granite because granite's the most common rock. It's like it is the earth. And then I used aluminum, and then because of airplanes as the main mode of transportation, that's why I went to aluminum. And the flowers, most of you probably think they're fake. They are actually real flowers that have gone through a process of eternalization. So this is a product that comes from Colombia, and it's a patented product. It's really top secret, and the only thing that I know about them, this is as much as they could tell me, is that they rapidly dehydrate them, very quickly rehydrate them with a glycerin-based chemical solution, and fabric dyes. So they're exactly half real and half fake. So all of the flowers in the show have gone through this process of eternalization, with the exception of the arrangement that's on Monica's desk in the very front of the room. So that every week Monica's going to get a new arrangement of fresh flowers in comparison to these eternalized ones.
So it seems like you're taking a lot of very impermanent materials and then replacing them with more permanent stand-ins, granite, eternalized flowers. Is there a relationship to the sort of abstraction of time, permanence, impermanence that one would find in the global flower trade? I mean, flowers die really quickly, right? How do you trade them?
Right, but they manage to. They constantly breed them to last longer and longer and longer and longer. I think that the main source of inspiration came from the eternalizing process, because in my mind I went down there and saw this product and I was like, why would you do that to a flower? Like, part of what's so amazing about flowers is that they die, and that their temporality. And so then I was like, there's this desire in us as human beings to make experience or things last forever. And so that was, how do I make a flower arrangement last forever?
At a earlier walkthrough, I think very romantically, I brought the flower to my nose to smell it, because that's what you do when you're faced with a flower, be it an eternalized one or not. And she just starts laughing at me because I'm just smelling formaldehyde or whatever. So then that sort of launched into this discussion of scent. I mean, obviously, the flower is this sort of pheromonal organ, and then I found out that actually the pheromone, the scent, is what kills the flower. So they're actually being bred. Commercial roses are being bred to not smell at all.
Is there anybody here who's in the floral trade? Who works in the commercial floral trade? No? Okay.
Good.
I thought there might be there was a good chance since we're in Miami, but I was like, can we fact check this? I was going to see if there's a fact checker in the room.
How long have you worked with the flower?
I started working with flowers in 2009 or 2008. My grandfather was a wildflower photographer, and so I had really early exposure to wildflowers. And then, as a way to support myself as an artist in New York City, I worked as a floral designer. So I did commercial photo shoots, like TV commercials, whatever anybody needed me to do. I did events, huge events for things. And I had a studio visit with somebody, and they were like, and I had done a spread that was in a magazine, and it was open on my desk, and they were like, oh my God, that arrangement is amazing. What is that? And I was like, oh, I made that. And he said, what? Why isn't that in your work? Why are you separating those two worlds? That doesn't make any sense. And so that's how flowers entered, was from the commercial side and the wildflower side. So the very first project, the really big flower project that I did, was I traveled to the Himalayas, and I went to the Valley of Flowers, a very, very remote region. So I went and found the wildest flowers possible, and now I'm working with the most commercial flowers possible.
And what are the distinguishing characteristics of those commercial flowers? I mean, besides the fact that they're lasting longer and longer, that they have no, or like the smell has been depleted. We mentioned earlier that there's only several, or 10 or 20 that, you know, are really traded on a daily basis. Is there any sort of like homogenizing aesthetic effort that, you know, to streamline this process of distribution?
Absolutely. Everyone thinks that, like, you think of a rose and you really think of a commercial rose, but there are hundreds of types of roses. And actually, roses are the oldest known fossil record of flowers. So it's the hardiest flower as well. It will be here long after we are.
So have we arrived at this sort of like idealized rose, you know, to quote Gertrude Stein, the rose that is a rose is a rose.
A rose is a rose is a rose is a rose. Yeah, but there's all kinds of shapes and sizes and colors and smells.
It seems like this, the show's about flowers, obviously, but like also there's this other sort of like whir of logistics that sort of like that exists over it, and I think a really fascinating visualization of that is these stands for the sculptures. Could you talk about where these boxes came from?
Yeah, so these boxes were scavenged from the wholesalers out near the airport here. So all of these flowers once transported. All of these boxes once transported flowers to here. So they're the detritus of that logistical process of distribution. And if you look on the ends of them, you can see all of the tracking information, which is really, if you're going to nerd out like I do, it's really fascinating to see where they were, when they were there, and how quickly they arrived somewhere else.
And while they work, I mean, both visually and thematically with the sculptures, and like, you know, in a post-Rachel Harrison world, we take that as valid sculptural material. Are they parts of the sculpture themselves, or how does that work?
They are displays for the sculptures, so they travel separately. Which is really rebellious to say, which is funny. But the sculptures are on top, and the base is on the bottom, and they can be separated. I'm okay with that.
To take a more, to sort of examine another part of this show, the sort of social repercussions of this. I mean, I'm conditioned as a person like existing in this sort of post-Fordist economy to see the drudgery of factory work, to see these women like, you know, who have really sore feet working day in and day out for my aesthetic enjoyment. I see that as bad. I mean, has it been bad for the local economy in Colombia?
It depends on who you talk to. Like anything in a capitalist society, it depends on who you're talking to. If you're talking to the people who are benefiting from it, then it's great. If you're talking to the people who are not benefiting from it as much, it's not so great. So, your allegiance sort of can go in either direction, and I feel sympathy for both. I think before there were flowers in this region, there was no jobs. There were no jobs, and there was a huge influx of rural people coming into the city, but there was nothing for them to do, and it was a real economic problem, right? Is that accurate? Yeah. So they provided an entire economy for this new influx of rural people. There were chemicals involved. There were all kinds of weird, like the standing on concrete all day long. As far as I can tell through conversations that I've had, they have worked really hard to answer every problem as it's come as an industry. They've really taken all of the complaints very seriously. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think any of us in this room are factory workers, and for anything, probably. I could be wrong. Is there a factory worker in the room? That's so...
There's one in the back.
There is? What do you make? What do you make? You wash things? Store. Okay. Do you... Yeah.
It's interesting, too, that this happened in Colombia, or this project is based in Colombia. I mean, I'm sure there are factory farms around the world, or not factory farms, flower farms around the world, but the fact that it took place in Colombia and that you're sort of approaching the flower as this sort of abstracted, free-floating form of currency, both a social currency and a financial currency, is really fascinating. I mean, especially when you look back at Colombia's long history of having other forms of currency, be those gold or emeralds, or most notably, or most recently, cocaine. Like these weird things that we attach value to, both financial or experiential, but which, at the end of the day, don't really equate to anything. I mean, that's a fascinating aspect of the project.
It's all speculative.
It's all speculative, yeah. I don't know. We have a lot to talk about.
How are we doing on time?
I think we can open it up for questions if you all have any questions.
I think one of the important things to remember, I think it was in 2012, there was like a trade agreement that was formed between the State Department of the U.S. and Colombia to reduce tariffs, to eliminate tariffs, to help the floral cut flower industry prosper in Colombia, to create another export.
That was 2012, right? That was to put a Band-Aid on the currency change.
Create another economy, another export commodity for Colombia, amongst other things, to help create wealth in the country, other than the drug export. But you touched on something, but that's part of why Colombia can prosper rather than other countries, because other countries have tariffs. They don't import stuff to the U.S. without paying.
Well, Colombia is also twice the size of France. I mean, it has a very, amazingly diverse economy that perhaps has, undergone some rough decades recently, both with narco-terrorism and with FARC and things like that. But I mean, I think it is a rising superpower of that region. But that is interesting how the relationship between the floral arrangement on the table and whatever trade agreement is in place.
Yeah, international foreign policy.
Not my expertise.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
This is an experimental art space, and I'm assuming all this is an experimental new line of work. What does your regular line of work look like? Can you talk a bit about it?
Should we Google me? No, I'm just kidding. How does it really? This is the first time I've worked with videos. There's 2 videos in the front room of greenhouse workers, and then there's the video of the packing plant workers. I'm not really sure how to answer that without showing you pictures. Isn't that horrible?
Pictures should be after the talk, but that's the first time you've worked with videos up there?
Yeah.
When I walked in, I was doing like a really slow walkthrough of the entire exhibition. I was really kind of floored by how you used that slim aisle of space, between the windows and between those greenhouse roofs. I mean, you really create this empathy between the viewer and the factory, or not the factory, the farmer, who's like moving between these 2 dense hedges of flowers. I thought that was a really clever use of the space. I mean, did you enjoy working in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the first time that I've had a space of this scale to work in that's just mine. So that's really changed it a little bit. I can answer your question a little bit now. My last series, I make work in a series generally, and it changes quite drastically. So I'll make work, I'll spend a year making work in one way, and then I'll move on and use a different set of materials. So the show I did in September in New York was all cast bronze and poured hot glass sculptures. Very different, formally. The subject matter was the same, but the formal results were really different. So that's why I'm having a hard time. I really I need to challenge myself with new materials and ways of working, and that's how I dance around. Do you think that's a good answer? Asking my husband, who knows even better than me, maybe. Anyway.
I think that you're always, by nature, you're an experimental artist. So it's actually very similar to the rest of her work, and then departure from the previous thing. And this whole show was made. None of this existed until she came down here a couple weeks ago. The whole thing was made on the fly. She knew what she was trying to do, but by nature,
it's experimental.
To make it happen.
And that's normal. So it's hard for me to answer that. That's why. Okay.
So I think we have one more question, if anybody's interested.
Yeah, there's one thing that keeps on spinning in my head about the show. I think of a flower in a very feminine context, and I really want to know how do you deal with feminine notions in this? I mean, if I think of Colombia, I think of the women of Colombia and the trade between America. It's hard not to think of it. And when you're preserving flowers like this, a symbol of a very feminine symbol, are you thinking in those connotations? Like how do you relate to those notions of?
I think about that all the time.
I mean, it's just so indicative. You have these preserved flowers, these ornaments, and in Colombia, I mean, how many stories, how many movies have there been made with kind of these fake women? It's boob jobs, and it's so
plastic surgery. Sure.
I mean, and you're literally doing plastic surgery on a flower to preserve its vanity. I mean, that's what I just find beautiful about the show.
Yeah.
I
mean, the flower as the feminine form is so it's so important, and it seems so obvious that it's the underlying current of it all. You know, it's you know. So I'm glad you picked up on it.
Well, cool. Thank you so much. Round of applause.
Thank you guys for coming.